Hello, my beautiful people of baseball life. Welcome to our third installment of Dong City with myself, Henry Maldonado Jr., and host Vince Mercandetti. We have a jam-packed show for you guys today, so let's get to it. Vince, take it away.
Thank you, Henry. Welcome to Dong City. We've got a lot to get to, as Henry mentioned. We are going to, of course, get to some MLB hot stove moves that have been made recently, as recent as today, as well as talk about sort of, again, where teams are right now as far as especially playoff teams from last year. So we're going to do a little bit of predicting as far as the 2020 postseason. So stay tuned for that. We have some talk about the scandal follow up for the scandal. So we'll get around to that. We have a big announcement at the end of the show, so definitely stick around. It affects baseball life as well as the podcast. So make sure to stick around for that. But I think the first thing, Henry, we should do is cover the giant Laker in the room. And that is address what happened yesterday that sort of shook the entire sports landscape. Kobe Bryant, the NBA icon at 41 years old, and his daughter, his 13-year-old daughter, Gigi, along with Coach John Altobelli, who coached Aaron Judge, Jeff McNeil, among many, many other people who touched the MLB community, and 6 others passed away in a helicopter crash yesterday. I think that it's appropriate to discuss this from a lot of different angles before we kind of get into the traditional baseball stuff. And I'll start by saying my day was very strange yesterday in general, and I'll get to that in a second. But Henry, I thought maybe if you wanted to open with some thoughts on all of this.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. I actually found out my son called me and he broke the news to me, and he was a little emotional himself. My son, 18 years old, so Kobe is dead smack in the middle of his basketball watching phase. And, he was shook up, and I immediately, got emotional myself. Then as you started to hear more of the news, you hear that the story just progressively got worse. You hear the number of people that was in the helicopter with him. You hear that his 13-year-old daughter was, she was in the helicopter with him, and she perished. And, if you follow Kobe on social media, you see how much of an advocate he is for women's basketball. You see how involved he was with his daughter's team, with the WNBA promotion, and it's sad as a fan. Sorry, as a fan, you're sad, but then for me as a dad, you take a step back, and I have a daughter. I have a son that plays sports, and I couldn't possibly imagine what Kobe was feeling as a father more than anything else in that moment, knowing he could do nothing to save his child. And that was brutal. Kobe means a lot to the sports world. And between yesterday and today, you see the tributes trickling in, just countless stories. I don't remember who it was, but there was someone on NBA. On my drive back, I was listening to Sirius XM radio on the NBA channel, and someone was telling a story. He said, "This is Kobe in a nutshell." A former player, he goes, "I was at a free throw line, and Kobe comes up to me and he asks me about my family. 30 seconds later, we're inbounding the ball, and he's giving me a full court press, and he's back in Mamba mode that fast." And he just, he started to, tell stories like that of Kobe can just turn it on and off, and how there was no competitor like Kobe. And for me, man, as a fan watching the game, you throw out stats, you throw out everything that, black and white tells you, oh, this guy's shooting percentage is this. The game's on the line. I want Kobe. I want that confidence. I want that ice in his veins, that demeanor. I want Black Mamba taking that shot 20 out of 20 times. That's just me. That's what Kobe meant to me watching him. He was a special player for sure.
Yeah, and my day, in full disclosure, yesterday, I went to see Gone with the Wind in theaters in a re-release, which is a 4-hour movie for those of you who have never heard of it or never seen it, and it has an intermission. So I go into the movie probably like 2 p.m., So my phone's off, and go to the intermission. It's probably 2 o'clock, and I've got 6 different threads going of people telling me Kobe Bryant died. And I've only got, 5 minutes or so to process it because I went to the bathroom and I pulled my phone out, and then I see Kobe Bryant died, and then it's like, bam, movie's back on. And then I'm sitting through the movie for 2 hours. So for me, it was a very, very strange feeling. And like you said, I think my biggest takeaway that I didn't know is that Kobe is as competitive as any human being who walked the earth. And it's amazing to me how he could turn it on and off, because off the court, he's not like Jordan in that regard. Like Michael Jordan,
Right.
I think, was always competitive in every walk of life, whereas Kobe had the two different sides to him. I think that people are going to digest this from a lot of different angles, and they're all fair. You can say what you want about Kobe, the person, however you feel about that, and you can say whatever you want about the tragedy itself. You can compare it to whatever, but I think at the end of the day, what we realize just by viewing the outpour of support is that he touched a lot of lives.
Yeah,
And
sure.
the only thing I can compare this to is, and for very different reasons, when Jose Fernandez died, I was driving and I was driving with directions, and I happened to see flash across my cell phone that he died from like a Yahoo headline.
Yeah.
And actually had to pull over because it was like that shocking to me. And we haven't been equipped as sports fans to handle all of this, I think.
Yeah.
Like, I don't ever remember. Thurman Munson's the only one I can think of who someone in their prime or that iconic that just goes. And for a long time, we didn't see it. And then I feel like ever since Oscar Taveras, the huge Cardinals prospect, passed away in that car crash, it's like there's been this floodgates of just tragedy after tragedy. We saw Jose Fernandez at 23, just getting into what seemed like it was going to be a Hall of Fame type career. Roy Halladay, very similar to Kobe, not as iconic, but in the baseball world, that's a Hall of Famer who just goes as soon as not long after he's retired. And now you've got Kobe, and it's striking. I cannot remember any equivalent, at least in the sports world, of someone this iconic, this young, and dying in that tragic of a way. And then to add to it his daughter and everyone else on that plane, it's unbelievable.
The only thing I can probably say compares to it is probably Roberto Clemente. And even then, it happened such a long time ago that I think if we were in the social media age that we are now, that story would dominate. And I wasn't alive when Roberto Clemente died. You guys know how much of a fan I am of his. But it's probably the only thing I can probably compare it to. Jose Fernandez was shocking, and we saw the beginning of his career. But like you said, Kobe, we saw the beginning, the middle, and the end, and he was transitioning into this next phase of his career where even though he wasn't playing the game, he was still helping the game. And I think to see him go so fast and so sudden in such a shocking way, I'm still not over it. I don't know how long it'll take for me to be over it, quite frankly.
Yeah, I don't really know how to process it. It's just, it's crazy to think about. And really, I think the hardest I've ever been hit by people I've never met, right? When they pass. You had Uncle Phil from Fresh Prince, a little different, not sports related, but Stuart Scott and Jose Fernandez before this, I think, are the only two that come to mind. Stuart Scott, because at least for me personally, he really helped shape my earlier years. If it weren't for him and Mike and the Mad Dog and Kenny Mayne, and only Kenny Mayne because we have similar voices, I was always monotone growing up. If it weren't for those four, I never would have gotten into sports journalism, which was my major, for those of you who don't know, and was in the industry for a little bit. So Stuart Scott helped shape my childhood and also my kind of formative years there. But at least when he passed, like, we knew he was sick, and we knew we had time to kind of, like, similar to Craig Sager, we knew when they were sick, and we had time to kind of process those thoughts. When Jose Fernandez went, it was sudden, but I had just gotten to the point as a sports fan with him where he was more than an athlete. I was starting
Yeah.
to watch documentaries with him. You know, I watched the video of him meeting his mother after like 3 years, you know, when she came over to the US to watch him pitch. I was at that level, and living in Florida, it might be even higher than the rest of the country. That man was the Marlins. If you can ever say anyone is a Marlin,
Yeah.
he was that franchise, and he was that community, because it's a very high Cuban population where the Marlins play. But again, I didn't have 20 years to connect with him like I did with Kobe.
Yeah.
And I wrote this on Ball is Life, you know, yesterday. And if you guys want to talk more about Kobe, as was suggested yesterday, definitely join that group. But
we'll link the group in the comments.
Yeah, but that my fondest memory, I think, of Kobe, and I watched him as lean years for the Knicks. I could say that most of my life. The Lakers were by far my second favorite team for personal reasons. Andrew Bynum went to my middle school. You know, we were cordial. He would like definitely know who I was. But so you know, the Lakers were kind of my second team, and Kobe obviously was my favorite player on the Lakers. He took down the Celtics, prevented them from multiple rings, so I always respect him for that. But also, that All-Star game is what I wrote about. You know, he's 19 years old, and every single person who watched that game felt like Michael Jordan was passing the torch to someone. And if you were an NBA fan, you felt like it was in a safe spot because Kobe Bryant emerged. And that'll always be my takeaway. He was unbelievable that night.
Kobe was that guy. It's like you said, the closest thing to Jordan. And I know we almost, you know, disrespectfully, when LeBron came on the scene, we kind of just didn't appreciate Kobe as much as his career was dwindling down. And while LeBron is just a freak of nature, and he is probably going to go down as the second greatest player, people forget that you had Kobe there, and you had the league in Kobe's hands, and Kobe was going against everyone. I mean, he had Shaq with him one day. The next day he got traded. We're gonna beat you, and he went ahead and won 2 rings without him. I mean, but Kobe was special, man. Like I said, he had ice in his veins, and when you come to play and you want to be competitive and you want to win that game, as much as I think overall LeBron's a better player, I'd take Kobe in that moment, in that big moment. Give me Kobe every day.
Yeah, he had a bit more Jordan DNA, if you will, for sure. And I think without debate, in my mind, he is a top 3 in some order greatest player I've ever watched. And part of that is a product of my age, but a large part is how iconic Kobe Bryant was.
Absolutely.
Even people never watch basketball know who he is. When you reach that level, that's a whole different plane than just being a basketball player. So it was a sports tragedy for sure. I apologize. It was Jose Fernandez's grandmother.
I was going to read that. Thanks for the correction, guys.
Yes.
One thing I did see on, I think it was on Instagram, someone posted and just, it gave me chills. They posted a side-by-side video of Kobe's daughter doing the exact same backing in move, you know, the fadeaway jumper, which is like perfectly defended, and, you know, the teardrop shot, and you see it back to back, and you're like, I can't imagine the education that this young lady received. And I just, you know, it's tragic.
Yeah, absolutely. So the sports world, and not just because of Kobe, obviously, also his daughter and Coach Altobelli and everyone else on that plane is just a little bit worse today. So, you know, I thought that it would be proper to start off the show discussing that. Now that has kind of been put to rest a little bit, we do want to get into some baseball here. So, you know,
that's what we're here.
Yeah.
It's me, you, the captain, and our fans.
Yeah, so here we go. Let's talk about the offseason a little bit, more recent stuff that's happened since we last talked. Marcell Ozuna, 1-year deal, $18 million to the Braves, kind of replacing Josh Donaldson's bat, if you will. Josh Donaldson himself going to the Twins, 4 years, $92 million, just adding a bat there. And then you've got Nolan Arenado staying put in Colorado, and we probably believe at this point that'll be the case at least through the winter. Nick Castellanos, that was a big bet that a lot of people thought could make a difference. He's going to the Reds, 4 years, $64 million. Interesting option after the first season. I think that benefits both parties. So a little bit of a shift. This is a lot of contenders, right? Doing contender things.
Yep.
And then we also have the Nationals now. They lost Rendon to the Angels. They haven't replaced him. Let's start with this. With these moves now, who is in danger of not making the playoffs of the 2019 teams? And let's start with the AL first. Do you think there's any change?
I think Boston doesn't make the playoffs again. I don't see anything that they did. I'm a big believer in Minnesota, so they'll be there, and they just got deadlier. I think Cleveland may surprise some people, and they'll compete more than folks think that they won't. They always seem to put guys together, and Tito's there, and he's one of the better managers in the game. I think they'll compete. Tampa Bay is going to be there. I don't see anyone in the AL East other than the Yankees and Tampa Bay. The contenders on the AL. I was trying to save this for the prediction show, and I know
where you're going with this. Yeah,
but I will go out on a limb and say the Astros do not make the playoffs this year. I just think they lost.
You have them falling out of the division, and
they're not making the playoffs.
Okay,
absolutely.
Go ahead.
They lost too much firepower. They lost too much firepower. They lost one of the better managers in baseball. The guy was a prick, in the media to people, but he was a very, very good baseball man. Very good manager. He outcoached Joe Girardi. I don't care what anyone says. And their GM was a damn good GM. He drafted and he hit on his drafts. He developed players. He made smart trades. That's a damn good GM who brought in a lot of talent, who locked up certain players, and they won. They were 2 World Series. I just think their losses, coupled with all the other stuff, I think this is the year they don't make the playoffs.
Okay, who do you think replaces them?
Oakland. I think Oakland is going to be a huge powerhouse. I think Oakland wins that division.
What about the other wild card spot?
The other wild card is probably going to be from the Central. So, maybe even the Indians. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think we're very similar on this, not necessarily with the Astros, but very similar in general in that I don't think whether the Red Sox keep Mookie Betts and David Price or not, I still don't think they're going to make the playoffs. They lost to Rick Porcello, which last year wasn't really an impact, but they didn't make the playoffs anyway. But the year before that, he's a guy who's going to throw 200 innings and keep you in the ball game, and they've lost that. And they already have a weak bullpen, as we know from last year. So that's a big loss if they were to make the playoffs. They've got Sale and Price, who are another year older. Both kind of have their injury concerns. Mm-hmm. And beyond that, they have Erod, who had a career year, so that's a legitimate arm. But then after those 3, you've got Eovaldi, who, even if he stays healthy, which he has never really done, he isn't built up enough to go a full season. They don't have a farm system with arms waiting, and they don't really have a 5th starter. So I don't see, and their bullpen's thin. Like I said, it's not like they're going to compensate that way. So I don't see the arms in Boston, even if Betts stays and they have a great lineup, to put them past Tampa or New York, who both improved. And then we get to the AL West, and I agree with you. Oakland terrifies me. As a Yankee fan, I'll say the only team this year who truly worries me is Oakland, and it's because they already had a good bullpen, and they already have a lineup that, for whatever reason, seems to hit well against AL East teams. And now they've got a scary rotation if it stays healthy, with Puck and Montas coming back, and then you've got Minaya. It's a deep and it's a high upside rotation, and they do have a farm system. So Oakland, I think, can win the division. I'm not going to say the Astros won't make the playoffs. I think maybe they don't win the division. I know you will. Maybe they don't make the division, win the division, but I do think they'll at least get a wild card, if not win the division again. And my main reason for that, though, is there's not really a team I would say will make the playoffs instead. The only team I can think of, Indians have a shot. They did win, 90 plus games last year, but I don't think they got any better. And it's really just the White Sox. That's the only team. You can argue the Angels, but I don't think they still don't have pitching.
Yeah.
Rendon's not going to win them an extra 20 games. So it's really just the White Sox, and I don't think their pitching's any better than anyone else who's
The
already
White
in the
Sox,
playoffs.
the White Sox could be that team that we get every year that comes out of nowhere, unexpected. The White Sox have a lot of talent. I'm
Yeah,
not sold
great
on
lineup.
I'm not sold on Boston's pitching. Like I said, I know you said you're afraid of Oakland. I will always have Tampa Bay right in my rearview mirror. I just think
That's
those
fair.
guys. That's
If their
probably
big
the
three stays healthy
smartest.
all
Yeah,
year.
that's probably the smartest organization in baseball from start to finish. You give them a deep bank account and they can build a dynasty.
Yeah,
But
they're a big pain
Tampa
in the
Bay
ass
did,
too.
yeah,
Yeah.
they make smart trades. They may get rid of a guy a year before they should have, but what they always get back always hits. Always hits.
What's interesting to keep track of the AL before we move to the NL here is that I think there's a very good chance for the first time since they emerged that the Yankees will have home field this year. And why I think that's interesting, besides the fact they'll have home field this year, is that they're going to play the wild card winner. And why I find that interesting is it could set up a short series with either Oakland or Tampa. And that terrifies me. So I would much rather have the Twins in a 5-game series so we could sweep them or win in 4 or whatever is going to happen. They don't scare me. They could have 9 all-stars in their lineup and it still wouldn't worry me in the least. And I said that last year when everyone was like, well, they won 100 games. Well, they're the Twins. It's just how it is until it's not. But Tampa or Oakland's rotation in a short series, even with Garrett Cole at it and Severino and Paxton and Tanaka, it's not something to ignore. So it should be interesting.
For me, Oakland has 2 of probably the most underrated players in the game. That 2 of my favorite players. You guys know I've been screaming the Matt Chapman. I've been waving that flag for 2 seasons now, and I still think he's the best third baseman in the game. Matt Olson, no one talks about him, and the dude is a legit stud on offense and defense. They 2 of the best corners in the game, and no one talks about them.
Yeah, and he was hurt some of last year, which I think it lowers the perception of him, even though it shouldn't. Yeah, I mean, so that's the AL might. I would take the under if it was 1.5 teams from 2019 don't make the playoffs. I think at most you'll see 1 team different. And if I had to take a team out of the playoffs, it would probably be Houston, just because you have they could get home field advantage again, or they can miss the playoffs entirely, and neither one would shock me based on everything that's happened with them.
Them getting whole field depends on if they get wholesale prices on new trash cans or not. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, and they could always devise new cheating. So, you have no idea what to expect from them. If I had to choose one of the teams to get knocked out of the playoffs, it would be them. And if I had to choose one team to make it, it would be the White Sox. But I don't think that's going to happen. So I personally don't see any change. Maybe the division changes in the West.
Yeah.
I think all the same teams will return. The NL, I don't feel that way at all. So let's get to the NL here. Last year, just to recap, Braves won the NL East. Nationals won the wild card. Brewers won the wild card, and the Cardinals won the NL Central, and then the Dodgers won the NL West. Do you see any of those teams failing to make the playoffs this year?
Milwaukee's always weird.
Yeah, I have no idea how they're good ever.
Yeah, I until they do it again, I don't have confidence in them to do it again. There's a few interesting teams out there for me. San Diego's an interesting team. I think they have a lot of talent. I think if they gel correctly, they can do some damage. I know there's been trade talks linked to them, so they may just get more talent. But San Diego's an interesting team. The Rockies went from really good to really bad really fast.
Yeah, what is their thought? They had so many good position prospects. They lock up Arenado, which is always like the first sign that a team's about to get good when they lock up their franchise guy. And now they're like trying to trade Arenado, and they don't have any position prospects. I don't know what's happening.
It makes no sense. You guys know how I personally feel about Arenado, but the numbers are the numbers. He is one of the better third basemen in the game. Yeah. You locked him up. You paid him. You told him we are committed to you, and you stab him in the back.
Yeah.
So I don't get what the hell they're doing. I understand why Arenado's pissed off. I think he should be. You committed to them. They drafted you. They developed you. You made a commitment to them with the understanding, hey, we're going to commit to winning, and then they just tank everything.
Yeah.
I mean, if you trade Arenado, you might as well trade Trevor Story. Why
Yeah.
keep Story?
They're almost the opposite of the Diamondbacks, speaking of the NL West. Like the
Mm-hmm.
Rockies never go and make the moves when you're like, okay, it's time to compete. And then they just kind of stay at the starting line. Whereas the Diamondbacks, you're like, all right, you guys need to rebuild. And instead they are like, we're going to trade for some veteran, as they have done this offseason, or we're going to lock up Madison Bumgarner. So by the time we can compete, he's going to be in his decline. Like it's like they do the complete opposite things and arrive at the same place, which is like, maybe they're going to be 500.
Maybe.
Yeah, but the NL for me, I think there's two teams who are probably not going to make the playoffs. One is fairly obvious. We touched on it. It's the Brewers.
Mm-hmm.
I just again looked at their roster this morning and I was like, I don't understand. They don't have a great rotation. They have a deep bullpen, but not great enough in my mind to compensate for their rotation. And they don't have like a ton of great hitters besides Yelich, obviously, and like a couple of others, but I don't get it. And the NL Central's deep enough where like the Brewers could completely fall apart or they can win the division again. I think this is the year. I was wrong last year. I said last year they'd finish in fourth. Instead, they freaking make the playoffs again. This year, I'm going to double down on that and say they don't make the playoffs. I think they will finish fourth behind the Cubs. And that leaves the first spot, which I'm going to give to the team I've been pimping since June of last year, and that's the Cincinnati Reds. And we can start with the foundation.
We have been pimping.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not the only one, but I am the loudest one. And the Cincinnati Reds, I'll start with the foundation. After mid-April, they started the season like 1-9 or whatever. After that, they were a 500 team with a positive run differential. So even before this winter, I would have said this is a team that could surprise a lot of people. Maybe they're not a playoff team, but they could surprise a lot of people. And now we're in the winter. They added Mike Moustakas to play second. Solid. Shogo Agayama, the Japanese or the Asian import, and why he's important. We have no idea if he's good or not, but he can play center, which frees up Nick Senzel to kind of move around places.
If they keep him, I mean.
If they don't trade, Senzel.
Yeah, I mean, he makes sense to trade, yeah.
Yeah, and then Senzel's going to get you something pretty nice. He's still very highly coveted, so they've got that going for them. Freddie Galvis, nice veteran piece at shortstop. I think he's got another year in him where he can produce like he did last year. And Nick Castellanos, they just added today. That adds more flexibility deep into the lineup. You've got Wade Miley was added to the rotation. He's nothing, he's not great, but he's a veteran arm that goes with Castillo, Sonny Gray, who's the third, Trevor Bauer. So, I mean, that's the starts of a playoff rotation, maybe a championship rotation. You're adding Miley. You've got a bunch of guys they can kind of throw at the wall there to fill it out. The bullpen is 3 deep in my mind. Iglesias, I still believe, can bounce back. He gave up a lot of home runs, but I think that he's still an elite closer. Amir Garrett walked a lot of guys, still managed to have like a low 3 ERA, I think. And then Michael Lorenzen's a stud. So they've got good arms. I'd like to see them add
They
one.
have everything, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I think they'll use Senzel to get that. I think, like you said, his value is super high. He's a plus defender in center field. He, his bat projects to be a pretty damn good bat in center. And your outfield is crowded.
Yeah.
Don't forget they have Jesse Winker out there too.
Yeah, they got Winker, who I always love. I'll draft that.
And Aquino. I forgot about Aquino. They're loaded in the outfield.
So and this is a year where they have a full season of Bauer, full season of Aquino. And then you've got Nick Senzel, who, if it's anything like the Gleyber Torres track, might take a step forward this year instead of a sophomore slump. So that's a team that I think is good enough at least to win the wild card. And then when you look at the Cardinals roster, I think the Reds could win the division. They need some things to go right, but I think they can win the division too.
Yeah, I know the segment is on teams we don't think are going to make it, but I'm high on 2 National League teams. One is the Reds. I'm as high as you. I just may not be as loud as you said, but I'm very high on the Reds, and I'm very, very high on the Mets. I think the Mets have a ton of talent. I think they found themselves in the middle of this whole scandal to no fault of their own. The timeline kind of suggests that the Beltran hiring was before everything came out. And I mean, Noah Syndergaard can't have another bad season. Not with that ceiling.
Right.
Not when he's starting to make arbitration money. I just can't. I think the Mets are going to make a lot of noise, and I think they're a team that can do a lot of damage. I just saw a report today that Pedro Martinez was working with Edwin Diaz. I mean, you see what he every player he touches and helps, they take that next step, and I think Diaz has a tremendous amount of stuff, and if Pedro can help him between the ears, I think the Mets are a team to look out for.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are all good points. I kind of look at it like this. I'm definitely swapping the Reds and Brewers this year, so that's a done deal. Whether the Cards win the division or win a wild card, I'm going to say Reds and Cardinals are coming out of the NL in some capacity, out of the NL Central. But then I look at, I have to take another team to take out of the playoffs for another one to make it. I think there's 3 teams who could make the playoffs, and I'm teasing it a little bit, but I'll tell you about the team I think is going to miss the playoffs. The Phillies, Mets, or Padres are my 3 teams where I think they can grab one of those playoff spots. Padres need a lot to go right. The Mets need to stay healthy, and their core guys need to all step up. But I agree with. I mean, the Mets have a lot of positive regression. Diaz.
Mets have a lot of hitters, though, man. They have a lot of pure hitters that can do damage, man. And
yeah, I like the core lineup for sure.
They need to figure out who's playing where, but the Mets have a loaded lineup. I think they went the safe route with their hiring. But I think they're a team that can do damage, like I said earlier.
Yeah, they'll be competing with the Phillies, who I think they've got a shot. Phillies have a lot of interesting arms, like Nick Pivetta, who you never know when he can put it together. I mean, he's got swing and miss stuff, but they also added Zach Wheeler. They added Didi, who is going to be good. And they added Joe Girardi, who might be the difference maker. So
I like the Phillies' talent. I don't like them putting it together this soon. I think the Braves and I think the Mets are still a step ahead of them. So I'm not too high on the Phillies. I know they got Zach Wheeler, and I think I made this prediction on our very first kickoff show where it was a Porcello,
Porcello and Bach I like.
I am high on Porcello, particularly in Citi Field, and I think he's going to have a better year than Zach Wheeler will. And I think he's going to go ahead and help make the Mets into a contender. And I'm not sold on the Phillies, not quite yet. Sorry, Sandra.
So what I'm about to say is going to, I think, shake up the baseball life world a little bit. Like I said, Phillies and Padres, I think, have a shot. They need a lot to go right, but they have a shot. The talent's there. I'm going to say right now, I think the Mets will win a wild card spot. I'm not saying division. Braves are still light years ahead of anyone in that division in my mind. The Mets are going to make the wild card, and the Washington Nationals are going to miss the playoffs. That's the prediction.
I can see it.
That's the prediction I'm making. And I'll tell you why I'm down on the Nationals, who last year I'll say I picked them to lose the World Series. So this is not me hating the Nationals. Every single year I'm like, they're going to get over the hump. They're going to get over the hump. And then they did. They won the World Series, so great for them. But first of all, you start with that. It's very hard to win back-to-back titles. And
the hangover is real.
Yeah. Oftentimes, whether you want to call it eye of the tiger or durability or endurance, whatever, teams struggle to be really good the next year. So just off the bat, total anecdotal, but that's going to work against them. But the main reasons are this. I've been following them all off season, posting kind of different stuff. First of all, you have the high innings from October, right? That never helps anyone. Look at the Red Sox last year as your guide, and they worked the shit out of those starters.
High stress innings, not just a lot. They were very stressful innings.
And relief innings, because they were also the bullpen. So even guys like Patrick Corbin, I would be worried. You want a little bit of fantasy advice? I'm worried about every single pitcher on that Nationals rotation this year. But I'm mainly worried about Scherzer because he's in his mid-30s. He's been breaking down a little bit here and there, and now he's older, and just had a hell of an October innings-wise. And I'm not
worried about Scherzer.
Scherzer and Strasburg, crazy to hear. I'm worried about both of them. Strasburg just got the huge contract finally, and he's 31, and he was never healthy before he has his healthy season. Now everyone wants to seem to forget that he's injury prone. And he had a lot of innings in October as well, and he had a hell of an October. So their rotation worries me. They lost Rendon. Their infield is Howie Kendrick, who's in his mid to late 30s, Asdrubal Cabrera, who's in his mid 30s, Eric Thames, who knows what you're going to get out of him. They added Will Harris, which was their big bullpen ad. He's in his mid 30s.
Don't forget they added Starlin Castro.
Yeah, they got Starlin Castro, who sucks.
I don't know what they're doing. I think they're going with replace Rendon with a number of guys. I don't know how that's going to work. Rendon is a star. He put up big numbers year after year.
And he was clutch.
And he's a hell of a defender. Everyone you named on that list is not a good defender. I wouldn't be comfortable if I was a Nats fan going into third base with a rotation of those guys.
Yeah.
But that pitching rotation, until they do break down, is still awesome on paper. And I get it. The hangover is real. Corbin as a number 3 beats the hell out of a lot of number 3s.
Yeah, they're 1 through 3. Even compared to the Yankees, I give them the edge because the Yankees have not. All 3 of them haven't proven it together. Right? Nationals just proved together that they can carry the team to a World Series.
And they did. They went from, being that team that we kept kind of saying all season, let's go, guys. The talent is there. What the hell are you doing? And then they just went into overdrive and became that team that we knew they could be. And they just rode their pitchers, like you said, all the way to a chip. And they had a hell of a season, man. They were one batter away from getting eliminated in the wild card game to upsitting, the Houston Trash Cans. I mean, they were just they had a hell of a postseason, and sometimes that postseason hangover is real, man. That's a hell of a lot that they went through, and then they lost their biggest star.
And keep in mind too, we think of them as World Series champions because they are, but they were a wild card team. If you look at the regular season, this wasn't a team that won the division by 10 games. They were a wild card team, and like you said, they were a ground ball away from being eliminated, and then no one would be talking about them like they're locked to make the playoffs if they don't get that hit from Soto. So, and it's not a lost cause. They do have Trey Turner. They have Juan Soto. They have Carter Kaboom, who's major league ready. You don't know if he's going to explode, but he's there. They're not a lost cause, but they have a lot of pitfalls on that team. Even Anibal Sanchez, reliable fourth starter, mid 30s, 130 million into players who are all in their mid to late 30s, dedicated to that team. They've got their 13 million under the cap, so they can make some moves, but it's not like they have crazy payroll space, and they are going to reset it. I think we all know that they're going to reset the cap this year. So
I think they can go over. I think if they really want to make a splash, they throw their hat in the Arenado ring. What they give back, I don't know, but it would be fun to see. Even if not Arenado, maybe a Trevor Story, and you move Story to third.
I'd never put anything past Mike Rizzo, but we've seen this from the Yankees and Dodgers and now the Red Sox. I think they're going to reset the cap. I just think that's what you do modern day, especially after you win a World Series. You're playing with house money.
Of course, yeah.
A lot of pitfalls there. So that's I think that the Mets and the Reds make the playoffs. I think the Brewers and Nationals are my picks to miss the playoffs in the NL. So the NL was way more wide open last year. I think it's going to be way more wide open this year too. Which leads us kind of into the next part about free agency, and that is there anyone out there left? The free agent route, trades can always happen, right? Mookie Betts, pretty big name. Chris Bryant, pretty big name. They're on the trade block. Is there anyone out there who can kind of move the needle for you?
I probably would zero in on 2 guys that I think have a lot of talent. Brian Dozier is one of them. I think, he's a crafty veteran who's coming off a bad year that can make a difference. We've seen him year after year just fly under the radar, consistent as hell. I think he's still out there. I don't think he signed anywhere.
I think he's out there. Correct us if I'm wrong, baseball. Yeah. Brian Dozier signed. I don't think he is.
I I still will hold some regard for Aaron Sanchez, man. The guy just that's too good of stuff not to be
Blister
good, man. It's just his stuff is too good not to be any good. I can't believe that that's who he is. I'm gonna say that if I were a team looking for pitching, Angels, I'd take a flyer on Aaron Sanchez.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, Sanchez, one of those players you saw the glimpse, and that never goes away until you're done. So Sanchez there now did a
You know
little
who's
bit.
out? Wait. I'm sorry. You know who else is out? There's two guys out there. One can make a difference on defense, and one is just a character. Yasiel Puig hasn't signed anywhere.
No. And
Um,
that's a point that I'll make. You can kind of piggyback off of this. I split it into there's 5 guys out there. Brock Holt, utility guy. You got Scooter Jeanette, who I've been stumping
yep.
for the entire winter. And then Hunter Pence, who had a huge renaissance year last year. You've got Yasiel Puig, and you've got Ivan Nova, who might be the only starter with an actual arm who could go somewhere and do well.
Give me Aaron Sanchez over his ass.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think you left someone out. There is a plus defender out there who can play center field.
Cameron Maven?
He killed us. No, he killed us. Kevin Pillar.
I forgot about Pillar.
Kevin Pillar's still out there.
I'm going based. So MLB Trade Rumors has that free agent tracker.
Mm-hmm.
They, out of the top 45 free agents, only Puig and Holt are left. They're 39 and 41 respectively. The thing about Puig is he's probably the most talented out of anyone who's left, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But he can't really be a difference maker in my mind for anyone who would need him, like the Astros, A's, Brewers, or Nationals. Those are like the 4 teams in my mind who could add an outfielder maybe. Or I'm sorry, who can add an outfielder, but could maybe use a bat. And he can't really help any of them. So I don't know where Puig's going to go.
We got a comment that Ivan Nova did indeed sign with Detroit. So
yeah, all right. So there. So and James Edwin Scott's laughing, but Greg Bird is out there. So
I'm still rubbing some of the egg off of my face on Greg Bird. I am with James. Greg Bird has potential to be the Sonny Gray of this year. He can go somewhere, get a fresh start. And if he's healthy, the guy is a lefty bat that's going to mash.
He's going to go to the Marlins for 25 home runs, by the way. I can guarantee you something like that is going to happen. Yeah. Derek Jeter, and he loves signing former Yankees, is going to snatch him up for like the league minimum or some shit, maybe with a second year, like team-friendly option. And Greg Bird's going to go off. That's what happens.
Just know if he ends up on Tampa Bay, it's a wrap. Because if they sign him, it's over.
I'd be terrified if he ended up on the Rays, because then he'll hit 30 home runs and 8 of them will be against the Yankees.
Yeah.
So
if he ever lands with a team that plays the Yankees consistently, Dong City indeed.
Yeah, that would be serious Dong City. We would be featuring him on the Dong Report every single day once the season starts. So, yeah, I mean, there's not much left. I'm kind of intrigued by Brock Holt, but then I look at his peripherals and I'm not intrigued by Brock Holt.
Nope.
I hate him, so it'd be tough, but he would fit, at least defensively, he could fit into the Yankees. But I think they're going to rock with Estrada and Wade.
Brock Holt is the Jackie Bradley Jr. of the infielders.
Yeah, that's fair. He just, man, he had like 7 home runs last year, and like I feel like they were just always against the Yankees.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, not much.
Didn't he hit 3 in London?
Did he? Well, I know he hit 3 in the playoffs in 2018, which was
I think he hit 3 in London.
Maybe. Yeah. So anyway, not much out. Scooter Jeanette, obviously, really might be my favorite free agent who's left. I haven't given. I mean, he had 1 injury-riddled year, but before that, this is a legit.
Yeah, I don't know.
Bat, and he's left-handed, and he makes contact, and he's good with runners in scoring position.
You just described Brian Dozier.
Yeah, but Dozier had like crazy strikeouts, didn't he?
I'd like Dozier. I'd like I thought Jeanette was a good fit for the Yankees. Not to homer home that point, but I thought he would have been a good pickup. Wherever he lands, he's going to prove himself, and ultimately, I think he'll show the talent that we know.
Yeah, and Cameron Maybin is out there. I still believe he's going to go to the Yankees.
Yeah, I think the Yankees resurrected his career for another contract.
Yeah, I think Clint. Yeah, so we'll see. So I say I think Clint Frazier's buried, and Maybin will be that right-handed platoon.
Or you package Happ and Frazier for something.
Yeah, send Frazier to the Cubs. Chris Bryant.
Don't start.
Yeah, and Duhar and Duhar, Happ and Frazier.
Don't start.
They eat the contract, and there you go. So yeah, so I there's clock is ticking outside of the trade market. Not a lot to do in free agency for these teams who might be on the bubble a little bit. Speaking of on the bubble, we've mentioned them quite a few times. The Astros still without a manager.
Good for the ass.
The Red Sox maybe on the bubble, still without a manager. The Mets, we think might get out of the bubble, and they do have a manager. So the Mets are doing like good things this winter. It's nice to see.
Yeah, and Mets are making smart moves. Like I said, the ultimate Met thing was being dead smack middle of a scandal that they had nothing to do with.
Yeah, they got the short end of the stick, and they're coming out looking a little nice. So,
but there's way too much talent on that team for me not to think that they're gonna do some damage and be a very dangerous team.
The only thing I wonder about them is why they didn't sign sign Eduardo Perez once they had to fire Bill.
Yeah, I didn't get that one either. I mean, he was your runner-up. You would think, hey, that's the last guy. Maybe optics. Maybe Eduardo Perez didn't want to go back to the Mets after being spurned by them. Who knows? I did read he was on a list of candidates for Houston, but I was a little surprised that the Mets didn't pick him up.
Yeah, I am too. Yeah, I don't know much about Luis Rojas.
Well, most people don't know that's Moises Alou's son. I'm sorry, Felipe Alou's son.
Yes. Yeah, he is an Alou technically.
Yes.
I assume that means he's very good at dissecting the game because the Alous are pretty smart.
I mean, yeah, Puerto Rican.
Yeah, so yeah, that's like an automatic. That's like you win the lottery in Monopoly. Like you hire a Puerto Rican manager, you're gonna win 10.
You're good.
Yeah,
and that's how Cora won, right? He won on the same as being Puerto Rican.
That's what I said. As soon as we hired Boone out of an announcer's booth, and the Red Sox hired Cora, I knew we were in trouble. So I'm like, Puerto Rican it's in their veins. They just know things about baseball that we don't. So yeah, I mean, I have to assume it's a good hire, just solely based on profile.
Well, just know that the Mets were smart enough, and they hired a Puerto Rican before him. Beltran, the ultimate Puerto Rican.
We can't get Beltran. We're gonna get the cable version of him at least. We got to get something Puerto Rican.
I think from the reports that you read, he's very well liked in their system. He was interviewed, and perhaps they thought it wasn't his time yet. But let's be real, if he got that job now with that talent and he didn't succeed, you would kind of give him a break, let him get his feet wet. If he succeeded, then it's a plus. He really can't lose in this situation.
Yeah. Well, hey, a Mets-centric dong city. Big dongs for the Mets today.
I don't want to hear any shit from you Met fans.
Yeah, you can't say that we hate on them. I still don't agree with their last trade deadline, but now at least it's looking like they're making the right moves to kind of justify that. We'll see how it plays out.
There's a big fat I told you so, but you move on now.
Yeah. So our last kind of topic before we make this announcement, which should be pretty exciting, is we had the Hall of Fame vote, right? Derek Jeter misses by one vote. A lot of people think that I could give a shit, and I don't. He's in the Hall of Fame. He still is the position player who got the most votes, so I don't know what anyone's bitching about. But
yeah, the narrative should be Derek Jeter's first ballot Hall of Famer, not one voter.
Right.
I'm glad Twitter hasn't.
Larry Walker was way more intriguing to me as far as the votes went than Derek Jeter.
I agree. I'm glad we haven't seen Twitter backlash and hunting down the writer and celebrate the captain making the Hall of Fame. That's the story.
Yeah.
And Larry Walker, we had this discussion several times in the comment sections of Baseball Life. I'm glad Larry Walker got in.
I am too. I looked at the stats more and I was like, if you add in the above average defense, it wasn't that far above average, but it was above average. I'm fine with it. And I don't like the whole, like the cores thing. Yeah, if he was on the cusp, I can understand it. But Larry Walker did a lot of good things. I'm happy for him.
Yeah, his home road splits aren't what you would expect from a Coors guy. No, he's a Hall of Famer, and I'm glad he got in.
400 on base percentage lifetime. But they're an interesting kind of abstract duo there. Derek Jeter was going to be a Hall of Famer regardless of where he played, but he played for the Yankees and he won 5 rings and he elevated his game in the playoffs, and he has numerous moments that people will never forget in the playoffs. And then you had Larry Walker, who really largely didn't get that shot just by being on the Rockies, who we already determined are a bunch of morons and always have been. So it begs the question, like for Larry Walker, he got no benefit from the playoffs, but someone like Kirby Puckett, who I don't personally think should be in the Hall of Fame, he got a ton of it. So how much do
time out?
Yes,
I always say this: if Kirby Puckett's a Hall of Famer, Bernie Williams is a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I mean, Kirby Puckett to me opens up Mattingly. He opens up Bernie. He opens up Posada. He opens up like all of those fringe guys. I think are now worthy of a discussion. But I don't like to play the Hall of Fame that way, where you're as good as your weakest link. But it is worthy to point out, if Kirby Puckett doesn't win those rings, he's not in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
So how much should and does the playoffs and those sorts of numbers impact your Hall of Fame chances?
For me, I think they impact them greatly. I think what you do on the grandest stage of them all is what we remember the most. When we look at video packages, when we look at those big moments, if it's done in October, it's pretty badass and it's more memorable. Curt Schilling's probably the definition of that. The guy was lights out in the playoffs.
He'll be in next.
He may not have the cumulative stats or those benchmark numbers, but I think Curt Schilling's a Hall of Fame. Curt Schilling's an asshole.
Yeah.
But that's a separate discussion. I think if you're one of those fringe guys and you have monster postseason numbers, I think that should sway it. I think Madison Bumgarner, when he retires, will be one of those guys that we look at and say, he may not have everything, but he literally carried them in one of those series. He's that guy that when people say Kershaw, they say, give me Bumgarner in the playoffs. Give me Kershaw in the regular season, give me Bumgarner in the playoffs. So I think it should make a difference, and I think it does make a difference.
I definitely think it makes a difference. I kind of can see both sides of it. Like, I don't think a player who performs poorly in the playoffs should be punished for it, and because the regular season is a much larger sample size. Right. I do feel like for pitchers, if you were absolutely dominant in the postseason and you won like a ring or a few rings, that should, and this is just my personal opinion, that should sway voters. Like Curt Schilling, again, all personal aspects aside, all my feelings on him as a player aside, he should be in the Hall of Fame because he's one of the most dominant big time pitchers ever.
I agree.
And to your point about Bumgarner, I agree with that. But I don't really feel the same way about position players, but I do think it makes an impact.
So you're saying El Duque should be a Hall of Famer?
Well, that's the thing. There has to be a line. El Duque, Pettit. I don't even think Pettit's a Hall of Famer, and I love Andy Pettit.
I think Pettit's one of those fringe guys, and I think his postseason numbers should get him in. But you have the whole HGH admission, so his is a little foggy. Yeah. But I think Pettit's a damn good example of really good career numbers, lights out postseason performer.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Edgar Renteria, great postseason guy.
But that's what I said. The stage provides moments, man. Endy Chavez's catch in 2006, like if Beltran never strikes out, how does that catch go down? It's like one of the greatest catches I've ever seen. Endy Chavez's arm was like a foot behind the fence when he brought that ball back, man. I was like, there's no way the Mets aren't winning this World Series. And then, they weren't going to the series. And then Beltran just, that Adam Wainwright curveball just from hell, man. But, that Endy Chavez catch, that should be one of the all-time catches, man.
I was at a college party watching that game with a friend who was a Mets fan at the time, rooting so hard for the Mets in that game because I've never really liked the Cardinals. They're
Hmm.
just boring, but and
Like their town.
yeah, so they're like boring and like white and Midwestern. They never did it for me. But I appreciate their history though. Their Hall of Fame's awesome for anyone who hasn't been. But
Our St. Louis fans are gonna kill you in the
yeah,
comments.
but I was rooting hard for the Mets in that game, and I really do think that they could have saved us from the worst World Series I've ever seen in my life, which was Cardinals Tigers that year.
Yeah.
So very disappointing there. But yeah, it's a good point. Andy Chavez catch would have been as much of an iconic symbol to the Mets as any team's
Anything.
anything.
It would probably be the Piazza home run and then the Andy Chavez catch.
Yeah, yeah.
Because, like I said, man, in the moment, he brought that ball back, man. His arm is so far behind the fence. It was just, as a baseball fan, it was a hell of a moment.
It was an unbelievable catch. And then you got Pine Tar Molina just shitting all over it. So
green right curve from hell, man.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So we did promise a major announcement. We also want to get to Super Bowl predictions, and we'll kind of wrap up here. We'll start with the announcement first. We have been in negotiations, exclusive negotiations, with some members of Baseball Life, who you'll know as Leon Tompkins and Jacob Anthony Moses.
My guys.
We are going to launch the first and only Ball is Life podcast. Date to be determined, show name to be determined. But I thought, in the light of this Kobe tragedy, it's a nice change. It'll be a nice change of pace for Ball is Life. And Leon and Jacob, obviously, very valued members of our community. And we'll have, they stepped up and they volunteered for this, and we're excited. So
let me touch on that. As many of you know, I'm the founder of the Life groups. I rarely say that because I always say that these groups belong to everyone. The admins behind the scenes work feverishly to get things done. Vince was on my ass about all these podcasts. So everyone plays a major part. Leon and Jacob single-handedly keep that basketball group afloat. Those guys are on point. They are always active. And like you said, they went ahead and took the initiative and recorded a 15-minute podcast and said, hey, we want our own fucking show.
Yeah. And now they're going to get it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can't buy that kind of initiative. And it's like we always say, it's the Life group difference, man. Our groups are just different from all the other groups.
So be on the lookout for that. We'll have more information. I'm going to send out a fresh schedule of all the podcasts. I realize I haven't done it for this show. I'll do it for the rest as far as the next couple of weeks. But yeah, so Leon and Jacob will be getting their own Ball is Life show. We'll have further details on that, but congratulations to both of them. We're very excited. We think they're going to do a great job. And Jacob, being a Knicks fan and keeping that group afloat, is like, that's a sacrifice that I can't think of many people who could do that. So
Jacob is the man. Yeah.
We will keep you posted on that. And let's wrap up here, Henry. You've got your Niners in the Super Bowl here. I think it's going to be a really entertaining one. Niners Chiefs. What's your prediction there?
It's going to be a tough game. I kind of called 2 blowouts the last 2 games.
You did.
And you guys thought I was nuts.
I did.
And I think this is going to be a close game, but
oh my God.
Bang, bang, Niner gang, baby.
That's as gaudy as your predictions and your slogan.
Let's go, baby. I say the Niners win by 3 points or less. I think this game is going to come down to the last possession. And I think this is probably the second best matchup we could have had, maybe Ravens Niners, but you got 2 of the best teams in the league going at it, and I think it's going to be a hell of a Super Bowl, but I'm riding with the gang, baby.
I gladly would root against the Niners. In fact, I will be rooting against the Niners.
Of course, you don't want to hear my mouth.
Yeah, I don't want to hear. Well, for me,
you don't hear my shit.
For me, the other thing too is that I've been so gung ho on this. I feel very differently as a Giants fan about Eli's Super Bowls. And I don't want to see someone like Jimmy G just like he literally is coasting into a Super Bowl victory. And it's
No, it's
not comparable whatsoever to what Eli had to do, but people are going to compare it, and that's going to annoy me. So
that's bullshit.
yeah,
He has a run game. We're a run first team.
yes, yes, but it's to like some crazy like umpteenth degree. The Niners running game is off the charts good, and their defense is without a doubt the best in the NFL. So it's nothing that compares to what Eli went through, but people are going to compare it. It's going to annoy me. So those are my selfish reasons. I also want to see Andy Reid win a ring, and I think that Pat.
So you don't want to see me win a ring. You don't want to.
No.
You don't want me to tell Matt. You don't want me to tell Bush now to suck my dick for the 100th time this season.
Not this time, no. I want to see Reid win a ring, and I want to see Pat Mahomes start his count so we can forget about Tom Brady in 10 years. And those are my reasons. But that said, I do think you're going to get your ring. I'm going to take Niners 30-24. I think they're going to do enough on defense to slow down the impossible Chiefs offense. And their offense has really just been killing it. They're a bad matchup for the Chiefs. They have a great running game. They're going to control the clock. I don't think the Chiefs are going to force Jimmy G to beat them, and that's really the only way you can beat the Niners. So
I think it's going to be one of those games where the Chiefs strike fast, then the Niners get the ball back, and they're methodical. They'll run 5, 6, 7 minutes off, tie the game, and it'll be that kind of game all the way into the last possession.
Yeah, outcome will suck. Game should be good.
Let me apologize in advance for the inebriated videos that will come in football life, for the massive amounts of corny 49er paraphernalia around my house, from this beautiful chain to my wonderful Steve Young Color Rush jersey that I'll be wearing since the NFL didn't let us wear it. I will be wearing this. I will be repping the Niner gang. I will be popping my champagne with the Niners logo, baby. Let's go.
Go Chiefs. You're going to be insufferable on the next Dong City, even then, 2 weeks from now.
You may be hosting solo if we lose.
Yeah, so with a reminder, we will be back 2 weeks from today, 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. Your next podcast, Total Bases, with Felipe Malicio and Sean Flannery. Tomorrow, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, Total Bases baseball, right back here in Baseball Life. This has been Dong City. Thank you for joining us, and have a great night.
Dong City, bitches.